So, how you doing today, David?
I'm doing great.
So the Rods are set to release Vengeance, your 7th full-length record, later this month through Niji Entertainment, and this will be the first new album from the Rods in 25 years. Let's talk about the reformation of the band and how everything has brought you to this point and the exciting release of your new album, Vengeance. How did this all come about?
It came about because about 3 or 4 years ago I started, becoming interested in doing like a solo project. I just had written some songs and wanted to do some recording, and I got together with a drummer friend of mine that lived right in town, and put some drum tracks down, and I started doing a couple solo albums, and I had one that was actually released on a real label back in '04, and Carl Kennedy, happened to hear it, and he gave me a call, and I hadn't heard from him and Gary in a long time, and when we really stopped playing together as a band, it was like a really good splitting. It was a friendly splitting. It wasn't like anything negative about it. And Carl gave me a call and said, "Geez, I heard your album," and I said, "It really makes me wanna do something." And I said, "Well, why don't we do a kind of a reunion thing? Do a couple gigs and see how it goes." So we kind of got together. We called Gary, and he was up for it. And we did 2 local shows, like club shows, like one in Cortland, my hometown, and one in Ithaca, which is where Gary lives. And they went really well. It was like 20 years later, and we were like it was like yesterday. It was like we played well together, and worked well together, and so we decided to kind of like continue with it, and maybe write some songs, and maybe do another album. And it's not something that we rushed or pushed on or anything like that, but we, little by little, kind of put material together and did recording, and one thing led to another, and then every year since then, it's been a few years, because people heard that we were kind of back at it, and because of the internet, we started getting calls from people in Germany and other countries wanting us to come and play.
Yeah.
We weren't really that prepared at the time because we didn't have an agency, we didn't have a manager, we didn't have a record label. We were kind of like just 3 guys that got back together to do this thing, and we started booking some shows, and we did go to Europe a couple of times, Germany, went to Norway, and did some festival things that we kind of booked ourselves. And it went over really well, and so it just gave us some momentum to keep recording. And then last year we actually finished recording the album, and now it looks like we're going to have a new album that comes out in May of this year.
Very exciting, very exciting.
Yeah.
So, back in 1986, following the release of Heavier Than Thou, that album in particular, you had, I'm probably going to butcher his name, you had Shmulik from Picture on
Shmulik Avagal.
What were the reasons back then for disbanding? You said it was on friendly terms?
Well, in '86, we had the band had already we had already stopped playing, and I think Heavier Than Thou was what we did was after we stopped playing, we were kind of getting together every year to do an album, and I think we did the Hollywood album 1 year, and then but we didn't play or anything, and then the next year I think it was the Heavier Than Thou album. And it was something that Carl kind of organized, put together, and Shmulik was someone that Carl had made contact with. And so he came in, and he ended up singing. He's a great singer, and worked out really well. So it's kind of different, from the previous Rods albums. Like the Hollywood album was pretty different too, because we had a different singer on that album, a guy named Rick Caudle, who's also a great singer. And that's how that album happened to come about. It was kind of like a project album, to do.
So, tell me about the album title for the new record, Vengeance. Is that meant to be interpreted as some kind of statement by the band?
I don't know if it's really a statement. We had a song that was titled Vengeance, and when we looked for the title of the album, we thought maybe we could give it a different name, or maybe we should title it as after one of the songs. It's not like maybe our favorite song or the best song on the album, but it was kind of a cool thing, and it's one word and it's easy to remember. So. I don't think there's anybody we need to be vengeful against, but it's kind of a cool update, kind of a title, and we just kind of you know, are having a good time being back at it, you know, and we're just like amazed at the fact that there's so many fans out there from all parts of the world that were like Rods fans that we never even knew about, and really because of the internet. You know, back in the 80s we didn't really have the internet like we have it today, so we didn't know what our fan base was, and all of a sudden here it is, you know, in 2008, 2009, it's like everybody's like from all over saying, hey, well, we never got to see the Rods, you know, we want to see the Rods and this and that, so we realized what the fan base was. But the title is like doesn't really have a lot of meaning, you know, as far as being vengeful against anybody. It's just kind of a cool, we thought it was a cool title to have for the album.
Very cool. So, I mean, you're talking about this large fan base that's developed in the years that you guys were away. Now that you guys are with Niji Entertainment, is there going to be any initiative to re-release some of the earlier recordings, Let Them Eat Metal and all those albums?
I think there probably will be. You know, I'm not sure if it'll be a situation where the albums will be re-released in their existing form, or maybe re-record some of the songs, because we talked about re-recording some of the old songs, Power Lover, Crank It Up, you know, those kind of things, and doing new versions of them. So there may be that, and there may be, you know, reissues of the old stuff too. I'm sure that there probably will be at some point down the line.
And when the three of you entered the studio to make Vengeance, obviously so much has changed in the playing field regarding recording technology, and of course Carl's a wizard with that. Was it a much more enjoyable experience for you making an album now versus back then?
Well, it was totally different, you know. I mean, back in the day, we would go to a studio, we would, you know, maybe be locked out, you know, we'd have 2 weeks worth of time, we'd go in there, we'd bang it out, you know. Back in those days we were playing a lot, so we got to take the new songs, you know, work on them live, play them live, really get to know the songs, and then go into the studio and play them, you know. Now, because we weren't out playing a lot, it was totally different, because we'd write a song, we might go over it a little bit, but we really didn't have a chance to work it out, you know.
Yeah.
So, you know, now with this album, it was like, you know, Carl would do the drum tracks and then send the drum tracks to me, and you know, and maybe Carl would come up and engineer, or maybe I'd do it by myself, and I'd put the guitar tracks down, you know, and do some vocals, and then Gary could do his bass tracks at a different time. It's, you know, everybody nowadays has their own little home studio, so it's kind of like a neat way and a much more simpler way to do it. Sometimes it takes away from the realistic part of like being a band and, you know, playing the music, you know. Back in the Elf days, you know, Ronnie, I mean, we would go in the studio and everybody'd set up, you know, guitar, bass, drums would all be playing at the same time, and we'd hit record and we'd play the thing, and if one of us made a mistake, we'd go back and we'd play the whole thing again, you know.
Yeah.
There were no click tracks, there were no, you know, like there is today, you know, we just play it. And there's something to be said for that, because it's real, you know. If it speeds up or slows down a little bit, you know, it's human, you know, that's the way it's supposed to be. Maybe it's not supposed to be click track, you know. So it is different, but it's cool. I mean, there's so many variables, there's so much out there as far as equipment and everything. It's just mind-boggling, you know, what you can do. Personally, I like to keep it simple, because what we do as far as music is basically simple, you know, kind of classic rock, classic metal, you know. There's really nothing intricate about it, or that technical about it. So for me, we try to keep it simple, but it is different today than it was years ago to record.
So tell me about the songwriting process for Vengeance. How long have you guys been working on these songs, and were any of the ideas on this album maybe from back in the day, or was this all fresh, all from?
I think they're pretty much all fresh. You know, for me, the songs that I'd written on it, you know, I basically write, I start with a track or a riff or an idea for a song, and then work it from there into a song. Usually Carl, I don't know what kind of format he has, but, you know, it's either Carl writes a song or I write a song, and sometimes, you know, we collaborate, but it's most of the time either a song that Carl wrote or a song that I wrote. Yeah, and I think that they're for me, they're newer, more current songs. You know, they aren't stuff that I had done in the past. So, and I think that probably was that with Carl too. It's the newer stuff.
So a lot can be said about the New York heavy metal scene from the late 70s and early 80s with bands such as yourself, Riot, Manowar, Virgin Steel, and so on. What do you remember from the early club days of the band? Can you recall if there was a sense of camaraderie amongst the bands, or was it more of a competitive thing back then? How do you look back on that?
I think there was camaraderie there, you know. Everybody was kind of shooting for the same goal, you know. And they wanted to play music, and money. I mean, I can speak for the Rods, you know. We weren't motivated by money, you know. It wasn't like we want to be rock stars, you know. In fact, the band, the Rods, was started as a band. I remember at the time I wasn't working, you know. I needed to make some money, and I hadn't played in a long time, and I thought, I think I'll put a band together and go play some bars, you know, just so I can pay my bills, you know, and buy gas for my truck. And that's when I started looking around, and I met Carl, and, you know, thought, this guy's a great drummer, you know, and we looked around at bass players and ended up with Gary being the right bass player, and the band was started basically to go out and just play some clubs, you know, and make some money. And, you know, one thing led to another. I was writing some songs, Carl was writing some songs, we had a guy that was interested in managing us. All of a sudden got us a record deal. Next thing you know, like, we're on tour in Europe, and, you know, 7 albums later, you know, it's like, you know, it wasn't even planned that way. You know, it wasn't planned that, you know, let's start a band and be rock stars. So it kind of worked out in a strange way, you know, but it's cool the way it worked out. But there was camaraderie there, you know. Everybody's different, you know. Everybody I think that we worked with, as far as like being on tour with, you know, I mean, we toured with Priest, Iron Maiden, you know, a lot of Ozzy, with the original Blizzard of Oz, you know. They were all great people to work with, you know. They all had a lot of respect for the opening act being us, as far as, you know, we're concerned. And I didn't see anything that was hostile, you know, as far as like, you know, somebody trying to keep you down, you know, that kind of thing. It was all good.
And you talk about these gigantic, super huge heavy metal superstar bands like Maiden, Priest, Ozzy. I understand that at one point Metallica was opening for the Rods.
Yeah, we did some dates in the New York City area where Metallica, you know, they were a young band at the time, starting out, you know, and they were opening the show, and yeah, it was kind of a strange thing. So you never know what's going to happen. You know what I mean? You can never, and that's why I think it's good to have the camaraderie, because, you know, the guy that's opening up for you today could be the guy you're opening up for, you know, next year. You know, because you never know. There's no way to know in the music business. You know, if you have a hit and you're on top, you know, a year later, you know, you're down and you're playing, you know, 200-seat clubs. You know, that kind of thing. So it's good to be, you know, like a brotherhood. You know, people they're doing the same thing you're doing. You know?
Yeah.
I'm back in the Elf days. You know, ZZ Top was opening up for us, and look how huge, you know, they became.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
For the new record, are you going to spend the rest of the year out on the road in support of the new album Vengeance, or what's the immediate plans for the Rods?
We don't. I'm not sure if there's any solid date. Well, I mean, there's plans to support the record, because once the record gets released, I know the record company's going to want us to be out there playing. So it's just kind of a matter of. I think just recently we picked up an agency for Europe and an agency in the United States, because, you know, like I said before, we didn't have a booking agency, we didn't have management, we didn't have a record label. You know, now we got a record label, DG Entertainment Group, you know, and the nicest people I've ever worked with. You know, I've been in the business a long time, and they're family. You know, it's Ronnie's wife, and the people that she has in her group of people that work with the label are just great people. You know, and I feel, and so does the rest of the other guys in the band, feel like, you know, these are people we can really trust, and we were happy to be with, you know. So we have a great label, a great team of people behind us now, you know. Whatever the record does, who knows? If it sells 1 copy or 1,000,000 copies, it doesn't really matter. The fact is that we did it, you know, and Ronnie's, you know, on these records, you know, which means a lot to us, you know, personally. So I think we're going to be out there playing. You know, I don't know who with or where or what the situation will be, but I'm pretty sure we'll be out doing some kind of promotion for the record.
Very, very cool. One nerdy question before we wrap this up. Who was the lingerie-clad woman on the cover of Let Them Eat Metal, and where is she now?
Okay. Her name is Sherry, and I actually went to school with Sherry. We were classmates, and we were very good friends, I'm not going to go as far as to say she was my girlfriend at one time, but we were very close friends. And at the time we did Let Them Eat Metal, we wanted to have a kind of a controversial, type of, for back then, it was pretty risque, and now in today's world, it's probably nothing, it's like looking at the newspaper. But back then it was pretty risque, and she enjoyed doing that, she was, I haven't seen her in a few years, but she was absolutely gorgeous back then, and a nice person, and I'm sure that she's still gorgeous, but she lives somewhere in Florida, I think, and I think I saw her a couple of years ago, and we talked a little bit when she came back home for a visit. But to answer your question, yeah, it was funny because in the last couple of years, doing these shows, like especially in Europe, people were bringing their own old vinyl, for us to sign, and the album cover was like showed up all the time, and I don't know if I sent her a text or an email that said, I've signed your ass more times in the last 2 years than, than I have, and whatever, because everybody's saying, where am I going to sign that? Well, I'm not going to sign it, I'll send it over here, yeah, so, but yeah, it was pretty cool. Pretty cool.
David, thanks so much for taking the time to talk metal with me today. Before we wrap this up, do you have any last words for your fans watching at home?
The message is like, I just want to say thank you, to everybody, for being there, for being a fan. It means a lot to me. It meant a lot to Ronnie. It means a lot to Carl and Gary and the band. To come out after all these years. And I know a lot of bands are coming back, they do their thing again. But it really means a lot to us to have you there as fans after all these years. And we just want to say thank you for it. And the funny thing is like, there's people that are fans now that weren't even born when we were originally out doing it. These young people, which really says a lot. It makes us feel pretty good because we're crossing the generation gap. So when we do a show, we got people that were there. We saw you back when I was 15 years old, back in San Antonio, blah blah blah, or whatever. And then you got like other people that say, this is my 18-year-old son or daughter, and I turned them on to you, and they really love the band, and they're singing the words along, just like people that did back in the day. So, it's a good thing, and I just want to say thank you to everybody for that, because it really makes, if it wasn't for you people out there, the fans, we wouldn't be able to do this, and this is what we love to do.